on enabling sustained growth in emerging Asia, organized by School of Economics, University of Hyderabad. I would like to call upon dais Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor B.J. Rao, Professor P. Krishna Kumar, Professor Prashant K. Malik, Dean School of Economics Professor R. Vijay, Professor Vijay Mishra, and Professor Alok Kumar Mishra. All dais. As we begin this momentous occasion, let us invoke the spirit of knowledge and enlightenment with the ceremonial lighting of lamp. I request Professor B.J. Rao, our esteemed Vice Chancellor, along with our distinguished guests, Professor Krishna Kumar and Professor Malik, to kindly come forward and grace the occasion by lighting the lamp. Dignitaries, please join me in welcoming them with a warm round of applause. This traditional ceremony symbolizes the dispelling of darkness and the assurance in wisdom and prosperity. Thank you, sir. May I now request all our esteemed dignitaries and guests to kindly rise and join us for national anthem.
जनगणमन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
A warm welcome. Asia stands at a critical juncture of economic transformation. While we have witnessed rapid industrialization and financial progress, new challenges such as deglobalization, economic shocks, and inequalities demand urgent attention. This conference serves as a vital platform to discuss innovative strategies and policies to ensure sustained and inclusive growth in our region. We are honored to have some of the brightest minds joining us to share insights and solutions. This inaugural session is presided over by Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor B.J. Rao and having chairperson Honorable Professor T. Krishna Kumar, retired professor and head Economic Analysis Unit, Indian Statistical Institute, Bangalore. To begin our session, I now invite Dean School of Economics, Professor R. Vijay, to deliver the opening remarks.
Good morning to all and welcome to the International Conference on Enabling Sustained Growth in Emerging Asia. I welcome our Vice Chancellor, Professor Vijay Rao, who has been supporting all the academic ventures that the department is doing. And also given his busy schedule, he is ready to come and spend some time with us. So I do hope he will continue giving us more financial assistance also so that we can do some improvements in our department. Right? So that's a small request. I thought we could use this. Professor Krishna Kumar, who has been my teacher, we were just talking, he introduced us to two papers, tough papers. One is growth economics, the second was general equilibrium. Both of them were compulsory papers. When he presented it, we felt that the papers were so interesting and so simple. Only when we started reading, we found that it is his method of presenting very complex ideas very simply that helped us in understanding the concept. In growth economics, at that point of time, it was interesting. He took one book which is called, titled is an edited book on growth economics, edited by A.K. Sen. There's an introduction to that chapter which is around 20 pages. He made us all read that, which says that the different paradigms of growth at that point of time was easily captured. It was a very nice reading of that particular thing, which we keep remembering. It was a pleasure to have you back to the university and the department to give the inaugural lecture. Okay? I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce our school, though most of you must already be familiar with it. It is that we are nearly 50 years old. We have moved physically, also intellectually we have moved up. Physically we started with Golden Threshold and now we are in the east side of the campus. Intellectually also we have moved up, and now at least when we go into any place, our students are there everywhere, and so we have a visibility about it and also an idea that we have contributed something for the improvement in all, some subjects at least. Right? So it has in terms of the program, we started with an MPhil program, went on to an MA in economics. Now we have MA economics, we have MA financial economics, and an interesting PhD program. Our MA program has a lot of students leave our place and go to different universities to do a PhD over a long period of time. Our strength is around 20 faculty, and in the near future we do expect some more expansion taking place. We have a PhD program which has around 60 students. We basically work on Indian economy, broad areas that are either development economics or macro. These are areas that we work on. And students are familiar with primary and secondary data when they are doing their PhD work. Now when I look over this 50 years, there are three generations that I can see in my audience sitting up. One is my set of teachers. I think Professor Krishna Kumar is there, Narasimha Reddy is there. Both of them are teachers for us. I have my colleagues sitting up. The next generation are our students who did their MA program and are back here working in some place and presenting papers, and we have our own students who at least now yesterday they had their freshers party. I think a little tired, they would be coming back shortly to visit us back. Right? So in that sense, it's an interesting four generations that I can see in my audience. And in terms of visibility, I think we made quite a difference now. We have at least around 2 publications per faculty that we are having at this point of time. We do hope to increase it in the near future. That's in terms of department. Let me also congratulate the organizers of the seminar. I think they had just 3 months to coordinate and do it. They did a fantastic job getting a set of distinguished lectures, papers to be done, and also congratulate the students who have been working a lot to make this event a success. Okay? Thank you, and looking forward for an impactful conference and interesting deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to request Professor Srijit Mishra to extend warm welcome.
Good morning and Andariki Namaskar. I think this is a momentous occasion. I think I'm just completing 5.5 lunar months. I joined on 29th August, which was an Ekadasi, and tomorrow is another Ekadasi. So it's before I moved in, I think Sushanta had called me when I was at IGEA that we would like to do this conference. I requested, can we do it in Hyderabad at the Central University of Hyderabad? He said, he being an alumni, he said, oh, that would be good. I was not sure whether we would do. I think I would now. It's nice that all my colleagues, students, and the Vice Chancellor and everybody has the Directorate of IOE. They have, there was tremendous response from academia across the country and outside. So I think I welcome you all to the conference, and we look forward to a very stimulating, exciting academic 2 days here. Including that, we will also have cultural and other events. Some of you, in the evening, we have a play by John Nash, the Nobel laureate. So we welcome you for that. And tomorrow morning, those who are familiar with the university, as Professor Vijay was telling, our generation people will be nostalgic about the Mushroom Rock, so which is just behind our school now. So tomorrow morning, as part of nature work, please join us to have some memories of your at Mushroom Rock. So I welcome you all once again.
Thank you, sir. Now it's our privilege to invite Professor Sushant K. Malik, Professor of International Finance at Queen Mary University of London, to the stage. A distinguished economist and scholar, he currently serves as the Managing Editor of Oxford Economic Papers, following a decade-long tenure as co-editor-in-chief of Economic Modeling. He also co-edits the Journal of Economic Surveys and Economic Analysis and Policy with a PhD from University of Warwick and over 100 peer-reviewed publications. His research spans international economics, banking, finance, and development. According to IDEA's rankings, he is among the top 5% of the economists globally. Please join me in welcoming Professor Malik with a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Welcome everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank the Vice Chancellor of the University, Professor Vijay Rao, and the Dean School of Economics, Professor R. Vijay, and my colleague Srijit Mishra and Alok and Krishna. They have done an excellent job in organizing this conference. I would like to give a kind of a brief outline as to how we started thinking about this conference. So it's been like nearly a year when we started thinking about it. We did a conference in the ISI Delhi last year, and that's when Abhishek and we were kind of thinking it's a good idea to hold this kind of event that would help young scholars. So it would allow knowledge sharing and, what is the state of the art on a particular subject. So that way young scholars in India could benefit through this kind of event. So we came up with this theme, enabling sustained growth in emerging Asia. So a lot of the emerging economies in Asia, particularly China and India, the growth process is shifting more towards consumption-driven economic growth as opposed to what we had seen historically, export-led growth. So So therefore, there has been significant change when you think about technological adoption, increased technological adoption, and you have increased pace of digitalization. So there has been, and also focus on sustainability and green growth and so on. So we wanted to cover all these dimensions. And I must thank all the participants, those who have contributed to this conference, and there are papers ranging across different dimensions of this broad theme. And I'm sure this would be a good conference, and you would, benefit from attending. There are like around 60 or 70 papers. So that's quite a lot for a small conference. And we have participants, probably not many. There are some who have come from overseas, but mostly all the participants are within India. Although we didn't have a lot of time, as Vijay mentioned, we had only 3 months. And this is something I must thank Srijit to take the lead, and also the department, the School of Economics, for kind of taking the initiative and hosting this conference. And I'll be talking a lot about all the publication process and so on. And tomorrow we'll be discussing all that. But just to basically, as an alumni here, I'm very pleased to be here. And I would like to thank once again Professor Krishna Kumar and Professor Narasimha Reddy, who are our teachers. Srijit and I, we were batchmates. We were here 89 to 91. So there was probably in the early stage, and Vijay was 1 year ahead of us. Raman Murthy is here. He was 2 years ahead of us. And so I'm really pleased and also honored to be here. And we will have more exchanges as we go forward during these 2 days. And I wish you all a great conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite our esteemed Vice Chancellor, University of Hyderabad, Professor B.J. Rao, for his enlightening remarks.
Very good morning to all of you. Narasimha Reddy garu, Malik garu, and Krishna Kumar garu, Dean of the school, Alok Kumar Mishra, and of course the original culprit, Srijit Mishra. We are sitting in a very beautiful hall, and we have all moved to the east now. This is the east campus. So the story is moving to the east. And that is the discussion today. Enabling sustained growth in emerging Asia, that's the east of the world, as we define. It's a very beautiful caption. When I was going through the national anthem, I am always captivated by the 2 words, Bharata Bhagya Vidhata. We always invoke Bhagya Vidhata. And that Bhagya Vidhata has created a template, the Bharat, which is the model for all issues related to the world. Every problem that the world manifests all around us is embedded in Bharat. And Bharat is work in progress. And if we solve the problems in Bharat, the world will have a template of solutions for the rest of the world. And this idea that we are the template is getting firmer and firmer by the day. So in that context, this title is very, very important. Bharat has always been work in progress. For a reason perhaps, Vidhata will know. Because we represent high density of issues. We are very intelligent, we are also populous. We have resources, but we have issues in terms of resource partitioning. So we see a lot of internal inversions in this model. And the entire exercise all of us are part of is to ensure that these internal inversions are unentangled gradually. And the economy is one example of that. In science and technology, similar issues. Per rupee spent, India does the best science in the world. There is evidence. But per publication, we do most uninnovative things. Our publications are there, but we get the least out of each publication because the data says we are not innovative enough in each publication. So there is a twist again, twist in the tail. Per rupee, do best, no doubt about it. We don't spend enough rupee, that's a separate issue. But whatever rupee we spend, we do the best. And we have been doing the best for decades, by the way. So you see that India has been an interesting country in many ways. And it is getting more and more interesting in the days and months and years to come. As we race up, 5th to 4th to 3rd, I think we will inch there, surely we will inch. But our problems will be fairly deep. With so much wealth, so much poverty. So I think I request all my young scholars to think about this model. It's a very fascinating model. And we have to ensure that we unpeel these layers one by one and try to ensure that we get to a stage where everybody is economically happy. Everybody gets to, reap the benefits of the country. One more issue that I will just red flag and then I will step out. One must wonder whether economics is just data and technology or human sensitivity. Or both. If both, what ratio? Most of the discussions happen in terms of numbers. And these numbers are numbers, but when you step out and go and see the hinterland, those numbers don't mean anything. It looks so unreal. So are we spending time in looking at unreal things sitting here? This is true for not just economics, but even science and technology. So one question all of us should ask, my students especially, are we spending time, spending public money in thinking, doing things which don't have direct connect? This question is very relevant in many, many walks of life in the country. And each of us has to find a sensible solution to this. Otherwise, it will remain a process incomplete to us. Because ultimately, we ask a question to get an answer from within. And if the answer that you get from within is not satisfactory, whatever scholarly journey you do is not very useful. You need to get a satisfactory solution that is real, that you see around and that should be visible. So this disconnect between what we do between these four walls versus what is real, this disconnect must diminish gradually. This disconnect is likely to increase more and more as we proceed further. This is what technology will do. This is what AI will do, whether you like it or not. AI is roaring to go. So this is an interesting challenge. It is a scholarship challenge as well as human sensitivity challenge. I think our education must be balancing these two. I think I made some points, and perhaps very relevant points. Please think about it. The points are very relevant across different disciplines. Thinking about these and coming up with some sensible, each one of us have to have a sensible solution. Nobody will tell you what is that. You have to find it yourself. So this is beautiful. Enjoy. It's one day thing, right? Today. Enjoy. I think you have beautiful lineup of speakers, and it will be a fantastic journey of learning the concepts, learning the real things, as well as interacting with eminent people. If the sessions are getting recorded, please share with all of us, and we will also enjoy offline in our own leisurely time. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening remarks. It is both an honor and a privilege to introduce a truly distinguished scholar, Dr. T.K. Krishnakumar, whose contribution to the fields of economics and econometrics have had a profound and lasting impact both in India and internationally. Dr. Kumar's academic journey is nothing short of extraordinary. He has held prominent faculty positions at prestigious institutions across the globe, including the University of Hyderabad, the Indian Statistical Institute, the Indian Institute of Management, and Florida State University. His teaching and research have inspired countless students and professionals alike, making him a revered figure in the academic community. Dr. Kumar obtained graduate degree in mathematical physics and statistics from Andhra University and Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, respectively. He received his PhD degree in economics from Iowa State University, USA. He is ranked among the top 10 econometricians in India by the Indian Econometrics Society for his teaching, research, and consultancy in this specialized area. Based on his doctoral thesis, Models of Optimization and Control in the Theory of Economic Policy, he was awarded postdoctoral fellowships by the University of Chicago and Center for Research in Management Science, University of California, Berkeley. Dr. Kumar's research spans several critical areas, including econometrics, game theory, and mathematical programming. He has authored over 60 research papers and articles published in national and international journals, and his work continues to shape the future of economic theory and practice. We are truly fortunate to have Dr. T. Krishnakumar with us today. His insights and expertise are invaluable, and his words will inspire and enlighten us all. Please join me in welcoming Dr. T. Krishnakumar on the podium with warm applause.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor P.J. Rao, R. Vijay, Sushant Malik, Professor Alok Mishra, and Professor, my former colleague, Professor D.N. here, and former Dean, also my student, former student, R.V. Ramanamurthy, and Professor Saikar, and several other distinguished scholars, students, and delegates. It is a great honor. I was in fact traveling in India. I just put a question to Srijit. I would like to visit my family in Hyderabad, but I would like to coincide that with a time that is convenient for you, for me to come and visit you. Then he told me, he remembered my birthday. He told me that around your birthday we are having a conference, why don't you come? So I cancelled my program of going to Tamil Nadu for tourism and chose to come here. I thank Srijit and Sushant Malik for giving me this opportunity. And it is also a great opportunity for me to listen to a wonderful curtain raiser remarks by the Vice Chancellor. Some of the questions he has raised are the ones I have been asking all along. To start with my own PhD dissertation, I wrote an existence theorem, and I saw nobody was applying it. Nobody was referring to it. What is the relevance of it? Okay. So I did some applied econometrics work. Again, it was a publication, I got publications, several publications. But what is the use? So I did not get satisfaction. I went to work in a social science consulting firm where we applied some of the techniques that we learned in econometrics to the actual real life problems in housing, transportation, education, and so on. And then I got tremendous satisfaction. So I resigned my job in the university and started working in the consulting firm. Then I found that the consulting firm was not giving me the liberty to work on what I want to work. So I went back to university. And then I became the director of a research institute to get funds to do the research in a university environment. But bringing the practical experience that I had in the social science consulting firm to the research center. It is in that situation I came to India and started teaching and so on. So sir, I really appreciate the very provocative questions that you raised. And the other day when I was giving a lecture, I talked about a remark made by physicist. He said, how would physics look like if atoms can talk? Okay. So the beauty of social science is that we deal with inanimate, living objects as our subjects. Unless we understand the psychology, behavioral aspects, other than economics. So there are politics involved, there is an entire ecosystem under which the economics operates. Unless we understand all that, we cannot really build the relevant kind of models. So I have been, throughout my professional career, if I ask what is the common thread in what I was doing, it is all called quantitative economic policy. That means using quantitative methods for economic policy. And I got that from P.C. Mahalanobis at Indian Statistical Institute. And he started operations research approach to be applied to Indian planning. He is the one who did a lot of statistical work on river water flows to do flood control, and his work was used in Bakranangal Dam. Okay, I get my inspiration from him and my guru, Professor C.R. Rao. So, to respond to you, we have to constantly ask these questions, the ones that you have raised. And the solution to that is perfectly given by Professor Mahalanobis. That is, you formulate the problem. It is problem formulation that is most important. Once you formulate the problem, try to bring in all the relevant aspects to solve that problem. Otherwise, what is the academic attitude is, okay, there is a model. I'll give you an instance. When I started jotting down my notes, I got a paper from a friend of mine who applied a computable general equilibrium model. He took that model and applied it to find out what would be the impact of Trump tariffs on Japan, on China, on India, and what will happen if some of these countries collaborate with each other and then react, what would be the result? So he did all that using a beautiful model called computable general equilibrium model. This is Professor Somesh Mathur. I appreciate his work tremendously. Okay, Somesh Mathur of IIT Kanpur. Okay. Now, when I read that paper, I had the same questions that the Vice Chancellor has asked. What is the model? Does it reflect the realities that we are talking about? Or I would ask the question, if I were to approach the same issue, what would I do? Okay. Then immediately I found out that computable general equilibrium model only gives a static response. That means if you apply the tariff, what will happen next period? Okay. It doesn't talk about what would happen to the investment, what would happen if they react, what would be the counter reaction. All those aspects are not in there. Okay. Now sometimes what happens, Vijay, we have a tendency in science to take something and try to apply it, rather than look at the problem and solve it. This particular twist in approach to research perhaps would answer some of your questions. If people formulate the problem and look how to model it, then some of the problems that you raise will be resolved. Now, let me proceed with what I was originally planning to talk about. We are really talking about enabling sustained growth in emerging Asia. And in order to understand that, we have to look at the historical development. The historical development is, we have had a colonial rule that has taken the wealth out of some of the countries with a heritage, rich culture, lot of wealth, all that has been taken away from these countries, and the rulers have exploited. But there was so much of wealth and culture in some of these countries that once they became independent, they tried to build up and come as fast as they could. But in the process, what happened was, we were governed by a set of rules established by institutions such as the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and so on and so forth. Okay. And they have dictated certain kind of framework. And then there were forces. On one side, United States, on another side, Russia, trying to influence these countries. And then there is an attempt by the third world countries to have a non-aligned group of nations that never succeeded. Okay. India was part of it, just like it's part of BRIC. Okay. And we had to understand, sir, to get back to your question, we had to understand why they failed. Why did IMF and World Bank succeed? Why BRICS fails? Okay, we have to understand that. Without understanding that, we cannot really formulate the problem and solve the problems. Okay. So when you start an institution, you have to examine the viability, sustainability of the institution itself. Okay, we are talking about sustainability of economies. But these economies are embedded within an ecosystem. You have to understand all that. So after we now reached a situation where, I don't know, I will give you a typical example. If I sit in Washington DC in a metro train uh, going in one direction, the train goes very slow because they don't have the labor to maintain the metro system properly. So there is some problem with the mechanism, the train goes slow. One train. On the other side, the trains go very fast. They are better maintained new trains. But you get a perception that your train is going very fast. Okay, when they are going in the opposite direction. Okay. That is what currently is happening. Like the Reverend Vice Chancellor mentioned, that we have a great potential and other countries have started declining and our countries are growing, and now the question is how to take this particular opportunity and exploit it as much as possible so that we not only sustain ourselves, in our sustenance, I guarantee you, the other declining advanced countries will also benefit a lot. Okay. And that is where, so what we would like to, and this reminds me that in 2024, I had a paper with two of my colleagues, and one of them introduced to me by Professor Sushant Malik, Amit Chattopadhyay and Vishwajit Devnar. Three of us wrote a paper on sustainable growth in a chemical industry. And what we had was a model, and to a certain degree, the same framework can be applied in the current situation when we are talking about macroeconomics. What it requires is you have to formulate what we call a supply chain. Supply chain is how do you procure your inputs, how do you produce, process, and once you process the product, how do you convert that, how do you package it and market it, and then how it is distributed to the consumers. You need to have the entire mechanism properly described very minutely, very clearly to understand the system. But that particular system does not operate in isolation by itself. That system is embedded within an ecosystem that consists of institutional constraints, financial constraints, the infrastructure that transports the inputs and outputs. All those things are external to the system we are talking about, economic system we are talking about, but all of them have an impact on the supply chain network. And in my school, my days of my graduate school days, we used to describe that supply chain system by using what is called a dynamic input-output model. How each sector is related to another sector and so on. Now, sir, Vice Chancellor, we have the same artificial intelligence that you have referred to. In fact, in our paper, we use machine intelligence. We use the data of the chemical industry, and using machine intelligence, we found out what is the analytic hierarchy and how all those elements of the production system, how are all of them are related. The model that fitted the actual data very close, because we use machine intelligence. If we used a mathematical model, it would not have been that good. So there are certain advantages of the new innovations and new technologies. So we have to take the best out of it and reject the bad parts of it. Okay. We should not be alarmed by its presence. Okay, that is my opinion. This paper illustrates, our paper illustrates that we benefited a lot by using that particular method. And So now coming back to the development of the Asian economies, there is a impression by the World Bank that some of these countries they got stuck, they are trapped, they are not growing. Okay. I take a different view. They are not trapped. They are in a situation where they are different than the advanced countries which we look upon as the model. Okay. They are not as good as the advanced countries, but the advanced countries no longer are good. There is no reason why one should emulate either a USA or a country like UK or anything anymore. We have to look at our own economy. Okay, to talk about how to sustain our economy the way we want, rather than to copy somebody. So the notion that they are trapped itself is a wrong approach to use in order to develop strategies for. And now, the same way as I told some time back, the issue regarding people trying to use a model that already exists. I mentioned my friend Somesh Mathur using already available computer generative model to simulate and find out answers to Trump tariffs. It's a good first attempt, but that is not the right approach. We have to look at the right model for it. Now, sometimes what happens is, sir, again going back and answering your question, what might look like irrelevant at one time in academic research may become relevant some other time, when the time comes. The reason why I am saying is, in my opinion, what is required now is some kind of a dynamic game theoretic model that looks at, sorry, I apologize, I come from a quantitative background, quantitative approach, so I look at some of the policy issues facing us from my perspective. So I look upon the issues as dynamic game theoretic models where Professor Vijay talked about my course on growth theory. So we have one growth model for one country, another growth model for another country, and so on. For all economies, there are growth models, but all of them are linked by trade. Okay. And they can also be linked by cooperation, political cooperation between countries. Okay. So you combine all these into a system, a dynamic differential game being played by the operators, which are the policymakers of the different countries who form into a group. Like Quad is one group that people talk about. Okay. And the Pacific countries is another group that people talk about. So these countries, how should they react to Trump tariff is actually a differential game problem. Okay. The reason why I said that there are already models is some of the people here who are present in my other lecture on game theory may recall my referring to one George Papadopoulos of University of California. When we got our paper, Srijit Mishra and I had a paper with him, then I had a further correspondence with Papadopoulos. And in this correspondence, I found out that he did some work on differential games. Then I looked at those differential games and wrote a paper for a conference in 2010 in Lisbon, Portugal, where my model was differential game model using Papadopoulos' work, a differential game model for macroeconomic policy coordination. I had already written a paper giving the framework for what I am talking about, which is relevant today. Perhaps in 2010 that was not relevant, but today it is relevant. So like that, there are issues that we can do. One minute, I just want to see. Nowadays, for example, if you see what happened in USA, I was in the United States for quite a few years. I was very much upset by the way my own professional economists were advising US government on free trade. Okay. What is the result today? The result today is United States had exported all their manufacturing to some of the Asian countries, and they did not have, people in the East Coast, in Pittsburgh and some Michigan and some areas, so much of white unemployment. Okay. All those people have now brought Trump to power, because Trump took an advantage of their need. He's not going to help those people, but he took advantage and came to the position. But United States is in a very bad shape because of 50 and odd years of wrong policies on the so-called open macroeconomic system, like a free trade, don't worry about employment, if it is cheaper to produce. In fact, one of the World Bank economic advisors who lost his job later as the president of Harvard, Summers, even made a remark in World Bank in an inter-office communication, let us ship all polluting industries to developing countries. Okay. So the reason why those industries shifted was the cost of production in the United States with the clean water and clean air legislations was so high relative to the cost of production in developing countries that the producers themselves, companies themselves, found it better for them to relocate manufacturing in other countries than in USA. That was the reason why it was done. And also, I would like to mention, people think the United States is not left-oriented, is not following Keynesian policies, it is following monetary policies and so on. I have a slightly different interpretation. You may recall what Keynes said, that in order to generate demand, effective demand, usually it is used as a joke. What you have to do is make holes and fill them. Okay. Making holes, you need you spend, and for filling them also you spend. In so doing, you generate some kind of income and demand and so on. Now, to a large extent, even the Republican Party, the conservative people, did the same thing in the United States. Dig holes and fill them, but in a different context. When there are no wars, they created wars. That is like digging the holes and filling them. And all those war equipment that they have produced, they are only meant to threaten the other countries not to use them. That means they are unused items. They were spending on unused items. It is like, again, digging the holes and filling them. And then those weapons were not useful to fight the guerrilla wars. Okay. So, what I mean to say is, there is no reason to try to emulate them. We have to learn from their experience. They made a lot of mistakes. Okay. And as a result, one of the major mistakes is they paid least attention to the equity, income distribution. So we have to target low income, middle income, and high income. All of them how they are proceeding. That is something which they fail to do, and we need to do it. By so doing, what we will do is we generate more sustainable capacity to grow by focusing attention on all the groups and have an equitable distribution. So, in my opinion, the concept of sustainable growth must include equitable income and wealth distribution. I think I have taken quite a bit of time. I will stop. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. As we conclude today's session, I now invite Professor Alok Kumar Mishra to deliver vote of thanks.
Respected dignitaries from the dais and of the dais, esteemed speakers, delegates, registers, administrative officers, faculty members, and my dear students. I am privileged to extend the vote of thanks on behalf of School of Economics, University of Hyderabad, at this inaugural session of the International Conference on Enabling Sustained Growth in Emerging Asia. First and foremost, I extend our deepest gratitude to our esteemed chief guest, Professor T. Krishna Kumar, for delivering an insightful inaugural address. And sir, your insightful perspectives have set the tone for meaningful discussion throughout this conference. We are deeply grateful our Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Vijay Rao for presiding over this session and for his unflinching support to our school and our academic activities. A special thanks to Professor R. Vijay, Dean of the School of Economics, for his opening remarks. Your leadership and encouragement continue to guide us towards greater achievement. I am also thankful to Professor Srijit Mishra for his warm welcome address. We sincerely appreciate Professor Sushant K. Malik, Abhishek Kumar, Professor Sushant Malik from Queen Mary University of London for highlighting the importance of the collaboration in academic research and international partnerships. Professor Sushant is also our distinguished alumnus of MA from 1989 to 91. We are happy to have him today and we look forward to collaborating with him in the future. I also take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank all my faculty colleagues, organizing committee members, university administration, school staff, and student volunteers who have worked tirelessly and with sleepless nights to make this session a success. Finally, a heartfelt thanks to all the participants, and with this, I request everyone to join us for tea outside the hall. Thank you one and all.
by what we understand from the emerging larger kind of, let's say, uh, ecological sciences. Without that, there may not be any development. And I am sure Malik would bring some light onto this. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Professor Reddy, for your introductory remarks on the issues that was discussed in the inaugural session. Professor Krishna Kumar gave an excellent lecture on some of the issues that we confront with today globally with regard to growth. So I will just use one example from his lecture before I go to my presentation. Professor Krishna Kumar mentioned that there is so much wastage of resources. Okay, when the countries engage in war, you are wasting resources, which resources are not benefiting anybody except selected few, those who are investing in defense stocks probably. And defense sector overall is going to benefit. So when there is no war, that sector is contracting, right? So sometimes there are lobbies who try, who lobby politicians in order to initiate war. Okay, that's how, started in 2003, Iraq war, and so on. So the point is there is so much wastage of resources, and developed countries engage in. Developing countries, they are constrained. They have limited resources. They would like to grow, and therefore they liberalize and so on. And issue is important because we have studied in the economics textbooks domestic resource mobilization, which is an important thing. You mobilize resources, you save, and that you can invest and help economic growth. And so we are arranging, this work is developed jointly with Abhishek, who is here, and Professor Kunal Sen, who is the director of LIDER. So this research started, it's actually part of a domestic resource mobilization project, because a lot of the countries in Africa, they are constrained. They have a resource constraint. They rely on foreign aid and other types of inflows in order to help their growth. So when countries don't have their own resources, they rely on overseas inflow, including capital inflows, in order to help their growth process. So we are raising a question here that obviously, if you have higher capital accumulation, you will have growth. But if you have an increase in output, okay, that is more than what you have invested in terms of inputs, that would actually help you to grow faster. Okay, so there are a lot of econometric challenges. There is problem of endogeneity. Everything is connected in a macroeconomy, and so you have productivity growth could drive saving. Saving also could drive productivity growth. That we have studied in macroeconomics traditional macro theory. And so we are given this resource constraint, we want to understand why this saving behavior is different in different countries. We are using cross-country data across countries. We have a range of over 100 countries. So we're trying to understand what explains this. There has been a lot of literature trying to understand savings behavior across countries, savings behavior across countries. And we want to look at whether this, if you have higher productivity growth, would you be able to increase your savings? And thereby invest and subsequent growth. So I am going to, here we use an example here. Let's look at Cameroon. Cameroon got independence in 1960. For a quarter of a century, the country actually did exceedingly well. But after 25 years, in the mid-80s, and the country experienced significant drop in productivity growth. Okay, and since the middle of 80s. So what led to that kind of growth? So basically, there was it's an agriculture-dependent economy, and there were commodity price fluctuations, and that gave rise to prices fell, and therefore, there was not enough diversification of the economy, so economy contracted significantly, and obviously there was weaker institutions, and they did not enable that growth because they didn't pick up that technological development that is required in order to sustain that growth. And so actually our work is going to contribute in that sustainability idea. How do we achieve sustained growth? This is the paper we had. I thought this would be more relevant given the theme rather than going into any other topic. We have a follow-up topic on digitalization, which Abhishek will present tomorrow. And we'll go into those issues and how it is driving consumption-led growth and so on. So the point I'm making here is that there is a significant drop in this productivity growth. So there could be some kind of a transition occurring. Okay? So at the same time, you see the saving rate is dropping at the same, whenever there is a decline in productivity growth, and you see a kind of transition there. Savings rate is also showing a negative trend. So we are finding, one could argue the other way around, right, from economic theory. So there is this, endogeneity, omitted variable bias, and measurement error. There would be a number of challenges which one has to get into, to explain which one is driving which one. And we'll try to answer in a novel way in this paper. So, Cameroon, we find this pattern. I'm just motivating at this point. Then let's look at Malaysia here, with similar. So here, there was a transition here, TFP transition in Malaysia. Since 86, there was significant increase in productivity growth. So emerging countries which are growing rapidly, they experience productivity growth increase. So at the same time, when you have this increase in total factor productivity, that is followed by an increase in savings. And if you look at savings rate for Malaysia, and you find the increase in savings at the same time, so you would think this one, productivity growth is driving, okay? It is followed by increase in savings. And we look at Philippines, but here we look at the other way around. So if there is a transition, savings transition, not TFP transition. When we are thinking of transition, we are thinking in terms of a big jump. Okay, I'll define what is the big jump we are describing here. That's what we call transition. Not just a small increase, but a big increase in savings or big increase in total factor productivity. So when you have this kind of savings transition, meaning increasing by 5%, so what happens? If there is a savings transition, here what is happening, there is a decline. So TFP is not increasing. When you have increase in savings, that is not followed by increase in TFP. Then our argument, we can't make the argument I showed you before. And so here, following a big increase in savings, you don't see a big increase in TFP growth. Okay? So this is the savings. So you can see here, savings rate after that point is increasing, but you don't see increase in TFP growth in case of Philippines. And now we can look at another country here, Saudi Arabia, where we see here the same savings transition. Because the point we are making is that whether when you have a big increase in savings, does it lead to a similar increase in total factor productivity? Because theoretically you would argue, yes, that is possible. But we don't see that. Okay, so you have a big increase in savings, you don't see increase in TFP growth. Okay, so this raises questions in which direction there can be a causal relation. Is it a productivity growth preceding savings, or is it a savings which could be due to higher income and so on, or whether savings transition could lead to increase in total factor productivity. You can see from these 4 countries, the basic, it's more likely there is when you have a big increase in productivity growth, that one leads to an increase in savings rate, not other way around. So our question here is, of course, how do we, why can't we simply take income growth rather than productivity growth? Productivity growth acts as a shock to income, and this can relate to savings based on permanent income hypothesis. We also control for a lot of the other potential determinants of GDP growth that have, like financial development, trade to GDP ratio, foreign direct investment. A lot of these determinants have been considered in literature to try to explain the relationship between, or the factors explaining savings rate across countries. So we are focusing on productivity growth instead of income growth, and our argument is that countries should focus on enhancing productivity growth rather than introducing policies that could enhance savings. Okay, because you saw from the motivation that those 4 countries, we see that if you try to enhance savings by giving savings incentives, that really doesn't produce an improvement in productivity growth. But we only showed 4 countries. Okay, so we'll be using over 100 countries to try to establish a correlation between, basically we'll establish a causal relation, moving from not just a correlation, and between productivity growth and following subsequent increase in savings. So literature is quite extensive, and there have been a number of papers written over time. This is a very old debate. Okay, we are revisiting that debate. And we know that there is a literature explaining, savings should come first. I mean, we have studied in macroeconomics, introductory macro. If you have higher savings, higher investment, thereby growth, right? So that makes sense. Similarly, one would argue that given this literature, growth precedes savings. If you have a high growth, obviously you have higher income, and you would save part of it. But that saving rate is lower, much lower in advanced countries. People don't save because they borrow against their future income. Whereas in developing countries, they save because sometimes they don't have social security and so on. They prefer saving in order to use that saving when they retire. And if we would have a demographic consideration at the same time, younger cohorts don't save, older cohorts, they save more, right? So that kind of, the literature has moved on and looked at cross-country variation in savings rate. There are a number of papers, and we have just put a few, but there would be other papers also looking at similar issue. And this issue, actually, people are working on this around, 20 years ago, a lot. But, and then literature has moved on, people are linking it to technology shock. And and trying to see what is happening consumption and savings and investments. So it's also a literature where people are identifying productivity shocks and looking at the permanent and cyclical component of that productivity shock in order to explain their effect on consumption, saving, and so on. So we use we use both. We use data, we use also a model-based shock in this paper, and to establish this relationship between productivity growth and the subsequent increase in savings. So first let us look at the data. This is very standard, basic solo model, and so we write it in an intensive form, and this is quite well known. And our interest is this, this technology parameter here, A, which you would like to derive. This is level accounting, and we have capital here, and we use different definitions for that, and this is what we get. Okay, so productivity growth is fluctuating across countries. This is all countries are we have used data for all countries, and you see productivity growth. That's the mean, the red line, and you would say it had changed. Previously it was like negative in the 80s and so on, and recently it has turned positive overall. Okay, and that's the distribution. It ranges, spreads between both positive and negative territory. But on average, if you think about, if it's a flat line, kind of around 2%, you would think. Now, there is obviously a difference. If you look at the volatility of that TFP growth between advanced countries, high-income countries, and developing countries, and you find developing countries' productivity growth, TFP growth, is more volatile relative to advanced countries, which are relatively less volatile. Okay, that comes regardless of how you define volatility, whether recursive or rolling standard deviation. And so we do the same thing. We calculate TFP using a model. It's a neoclassical growth model where you have representative consumer and firm, government, and so on. And our goal is to this is the budget constraint for the household, and that's the capital accumulation equation. And we are interested in this parameter here, A, which is the technology, it's the shock, and it follows a random walk, and then you have a government. So our goal is, from this model, we are getting this technology shock, or total factor productivity shock. So one we are getting from the data, the other one we are getting from the model. And there is no bias technical progress here. It's a Higgs neutral technological progress. There is increase in output growth without changing the proportion of the capital and labor. Okay, so that's what we are using here, and we estimate this model. And there are 49 countries. For each of these countries, we are deriving this TFP shock, and that shock we are going to use later on. And we have these parameter values to to get these cyclical components of log per capita income, private and government consumption, and so on. Okay, so that's the one which we derive TFP shocks from the model. And what we find a similar pattern that we saw before. This is for high-income countries. This is for developing countries. So this productivity shock is more volatile for developing countries relative to that productivity shock in high-income countries, which relatively less, relatively more stable. Okay? And regardless of how you trend the data, you kind of find that exactly same pattern. Okay? Now, this is a kind of another 4 different models we have used in order to get these TFP shocks, and we will of course use them alternatively to make sure that our results are robust. So the point, let me just explain a bit about the transition, TFP transition. We are looking at transition using data for 5-year backward moving average. So we take 5 years of data. We see whenever there was a big jump in productivity growth, we call that as a transition. So in the data for each country. And so whenever we find, like here you can see the 16% savings rate, and there is here a 5% jump. So that is 21%. Okay? So that savings rate now you can see remains stable. It's not really collapsing the following year. Okay? So therefore, we cannot say it's a transition if the savings rate dropped the following year, right? So therefore, you can say easily. So how we get these points? We get we do 3-year forward moving average, and 3-year and 4-year, and so on. T equals 4, T equals 5, and so on. So we do backward moving average in order to get the first transition. Subsequently, we are doing forward moving average of the data to make sure that this remains stable. It is not collapsing subsequent years. And that's what we do for both savings and productivity growth. So what kind of transition do we see here? Clearly, productivity growth that is kind of staying around 2%. So you can expect productivity growth to stay around 2% or 0 to 2%. Sometimes, in the past, it was even negative, but we find this kind of jump. And when it goes to that level, it stays there. So we want to think whether if you have this kind of productivity jump, can we then say that that would be driving savings? That's the question we want to answer in this paper. So you see here, we use the actual data here. So we try to identify savings transition. And so you see around 20%, you kind of see, before that transition, 5 years before transition is around 20%. Immediately after transition, you see it's kind of jumping, going up to 30%. Okay? So, and it's on average, but there are obviously fluctuations across countries. Okay? Now, similarly, with productivity growth, you kind of see around, if you look at the mean, less than 5%. So we are kind of taking that 2% as a mean productivity growth for all countries. And obviously, there are fluctuations across countries, right? So now we want to, so it could be, we'll do both ways, productivity and also the other way, savings. So now here, we have, this is the indicator variable, this is like a dummy, then we have country-specific time invariant heterogeneity, this fixed effect is there, unit level fixed effect, and you have also the time fixed effect. So both two-way fixed effect we have used, and these event dates are different. It could happen many times in a country, many times during the sample period. And so we also subsequently we control for all because all countries are they are different, they have different characteristics, so therefore we need to control for those time invariant, country-specific factors. So we show that these country level variables are not significant in predicting these transitions. Okay, so it's basically, it's mainly that the productivity jump that is explaining savings transition, and whether it's happening the other way around, we have to check. So we used a number of variants of that model. Initially we used all kinds of control variables here, okay, in addition to this indicator variable, which is really a transition variable whenever there was a transition. And then we have time trend and quadratic time trend and so on. So this is just to check that our results remain robust. Okay. Then we use a number of counterfactual estimation, both fixed effect counterfactual estimator. We do counterfactual simulation at the end, and a lot of the recent methodologies that are there, which have been used in order to establish which way that would be a causal relation. Okay, and so let me just skip this details about the method. So let me go into the results. So our basic result is this. So we do a standard two-way fixed effect here, which everybody is familiar in a panel setting. What you find that whenever we have productivity growth transition, so what happens to savings ratio? So the productivity growth jumps. It can happen in any country at any point in time. Whenever it has happened, and you find a significant increase in, so that's the treatment. Whenever it happened, it took value 1, otherwise 0. And we want to see 5 years before the transition occurred, 5 years after the transition. So 5 years before the transition, there was no statistical significant effect. Okay, so which means really it satisfies the parallel trend assumption. So whenever you have this kind of jump in productivity growth, you find that countries experiencing high productivity growth are able to see a similar corresponding increase in savings ratio. And it's statistically different, statistically significant relative to countries which did not experience any transition. Okay? Similarly, we do here two different models, without control, with controls, because countries are different. All the observed controls are taken care of, and unobserved heterogeneity has been taken care of by introducing the two-way fixed effects that I explained earlier. Okay, so this will tell you clearly that yes, it is the relationship is running from productivity growth to savings. Okay, now you would argue the other way around. It could be running the other from savings to growth, right? So what we do here, that we identify savings transition the way I explained earlier. So whenever a country experienced, like savings rate went from 16 to 25%, okay? And so that's a jump. 5% jump is a transition. When countries experience that, did we see a corresponding increase in productivity growth? If we see that, clearly there is evidence in support of the other causal relation that one would expect. So, I'll go to on the next subsequent slide. So this one is showing again the same thing, but with the different models. Okay, where time trend we are introducing and quadratic time trend here. Okay, so this result remains robust. Before transition, there is no effect. Immediately after TFP transition, you have significant effect on countries which experienced TFP transition. They're able to see a significant increase in their savings ratio. So therefore, you would argue the causality runs that way from TFP to savings. Now, you don't find the similar pattern when you identify savings transition across countries. For each country, we are identifying whenever there was a savings transition, it took value 1, otherwise 0. And it can happen many times during the sample period for a particular country. So what we see here, countries experiencing savings transition don't see corresponding increase in TFP growth. So there is no statistical significant effect on countries in their TFP growth when they experience savings jump. It could be happening for other regions. Why there was a jump in savings, we don't know. And but that jump is not able to explain a subsequent increase in TFP growth. So basically no effect on those countries, right? Regardless of the model that we use, different types of model, without control, with control, and then with time trend, without time trend. Clearly no effect, okay? There is no effect on savings ratio, TFP growth. TFP growth after a savings transition, okay? Regardless of the models we use. Now, to validate, to further make that result robust, what we do a fixed effect counterfactual estimator, okay? So in the control group, we have the same country, which are in the treatment group, right? So if those countries were not or did not experience, countries which are in the control group, if they did not experience a transition, what would have happened? That's the question one would answer by using this estimator, okay? Because we have this is somewhat unique, because the kind of research we do, we always, the treatment group and control groups, they are different. But in this kind of analysis here, you have a same country appearing in the treatment group as well as in the control group. So that's why we need to use this estimator to show if the country in the control group did not experience a transition, what would happen? Can we still be able to support the relationship between productivity growth and savings, or the other way around? Okay, so we see that, if you have a productivity growth transition that jump by 2% in growth, what does it do to savings? So clearly there is a positive statistical significant effect it is experiencing TFP growth transition to have higher level of savings. So savings rate is going up, significantly different from countries which did not experience TFP growth transition. Okay, so for quarter trend, the cubic trend, and so on. So we find that, but you do not have any support for the relationship other way around. So if we take savings transition, if savings jump by 5% or so, and you call that a transition, you don't see corresponding increase in the TFP growth. Okay, so there is no statistically significant effect regardless of the model that we estimate. Okay, so there is another method that we use. This is a more recent method, matrix completion method, which assigns values to lot of the, in DID, we look at post-treatment significance. Okay, so whether the treatment group is significantly different from the control group. But the control group also would have a change. There would have been change in their, in their pattern. So they could have. So we don't look at those countries which are in the control group experiencing, an improvement in that in those variables that we are looking at. So that's why this is what is called matrix completion, because you also need to look at the post the control group of, and their pattern following in the transition. So we do that to check again whether our results are robust or not. So look at savings ratio after a productivity growth transition. You find there is a statistically significant effect on savings ratio due to TFP transition. Okay, and that's quite clear here in this method. And you do not find any evidence in support of the causality the other way around, right? So if there is a savings transition, you don't see an increase in TFP growth, okay? And this is even a more robust if you look at the model using cubic trend, and this is clear, and there is no ambiguity here. Nobody can dispute that argument. Before transition, there was no effect of, so this is a TFP transition on savings. So as soon as the TFP growth transition took place, you are seeing subsequent increase in savings ratio in these countries, all these countries, and that is there is no evidence. But that again, we have to look at the dynamic response, not just kind of doing it in a static way, but how do we do that? Because these things are time varying, endogenous, and so on. There could be correlation in either way. So it's important to look at the dynamic response of these variables due to transition shocks. So we do that if there is a what happens to savings ratio, the effect of productivity growth on savings, and other way around as well. So use different types of models. What you see here, if there is a shock to productivity growth, you find increase in savings ratio. It's positive and statistically significant. Okay, for all these countries. So you have all kinds of high income and low income countries, and for different types of model, and linearly trended with the Hamilton filter, you find that there is even in a dynamic sense, productivity shock driving savings ratio in a kind of a BAR system. Okay. So so this is the same thing, an alternative model. Now this is the last bit I'm going to present, then I will be stop. So this is counterfactual simulation we do using the model. So that is what I presented so far, based on using data and country level or cross-country data. So now we do counterfactual simulation using model. The question we ask is if you have like here, I can use the same. We have a few countries we have used here. So that is the actual Cameroon data I presented before, the actual domestic savings, and actual domestic savings in Malaysia. And we are saying that this is the so Cameroon savings ratio, if there was what happened if we put the productivity shock to 0. Okay, so let's say there was we know from Cameroon productivity growth decline. I showed you the data before. Productivity growth decline. In Malaysia, productivity improvement, productivity increased. Right now, we say that if productivity did not decline, what would have happened to using the neoclassical growth model, we are simulating doing this counterfactual simulation. And if productivity growth did not decline, then you would have seen an increase in savings ratio, because we saw productivity growth and savings, they tend to be positively, correlated. So now same thing you can say. Suppose productivity growth in Malaysia increased. We saw that from the data. Suppose it did not increase, what would have happened to savings? Savings, you would expect, intuitively, you would expect savings to decline. Okay? So that's what we see in a counterfactual. Actually, it declined. Even in a counterfactual model simulation, you also find savings ratio declining. So you would establish from this that it is productivity that is driving, whether it's a productivity jump, as we did before, or using the model, whether it is a shock that stimulates savings. So that this is how we can establish a causal relationship. Okay, so in these simulations, we put productivity shock to 0 for 5 years after transition. Okay, and then look at the effect. So same thing you can do for the other dimension. Okay, so for Cameroon and Malaysia, and we kind of use a different filter. Okay, data retrended with the Hamilton filter, that was a linear filter there. So it's exactly the same. Okay, if productivity growth did not decline, you would have seen an increase in savings in Cameroon, and if productivity growth did not occur in Malaysia, you would have seen decline in savings ratio in Malaysia. Okay, so that, that is how we establish both using data, standard neoclassical growth accounting, and neoclassical growth model to show that it is productivity growth that is driving savings, not the other way around. Okay, so this is a novel way of establishing causality using cross-country data, because a lot of the time we use unit level data, household level, firm level, in order to establish causality. You don't find many papers trying to establish causality using aggregate data, cross-country data. So in that sense, it's a novel contribution. So the point we make here is that if you want to have sustained growth, you'll have to do things that can stimulate productivity growth. That's the way forward. And to do that, it's a focus on technology and so on. So a lot of many different ways this can be done. Also, resource reallocation, allocating resources to areas which are more productive, high return sectors. That's where the capital should be moving, where it is needed. Labor should be moving where it is needed. That is how, so the goal should be to enhance productivity growth. That is how you can stimulate saving, because it's very clear from the evidence that we have presented that there is a direct causal relation running from productivity growth to savings, not the other way around. So I stop there. Would be happy to take some questions. And Abhishek is here to answer those questions which I have missed. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. We have a lot of time, looks like.
It's a fascinating paper, and the results are also equally fascinating, even for a fellow like me who doesn't understand much of model building. But so, what perhaps you could see that whatever you do with the savings, it it will not stimulate productivity. But if you have to have savings, raise the savings, start with productivity. See, the logic here is, let's say that you can increase savings of the country by like manna from heaven. The World Bank gives you, let's say, a dose of huge money, or some generous developed country gives you huge quantities which would perhaps boost your savings. What it does indicate, the results suggest, whatever you do with these savings, if you just suddenly find savings increasing, it will not stimulate your productivity. The other side of the question is, if you have to increase savings, you have to start with productivity. I can start with increased savings by borrowing or let's say getting somewhere. But how do you start with that of increasing productivity to start with? This is one of the interesting questions that comes to me. But let me go a step further. I'm also a student of, of course, it's a neoclassical model. Talking about classical, I just cannot avoid raising a simple question, right from Ricardo down to that of Joan Robinson to Karnowski, the distributional question. When you are talking in terms of productivity leading to that of, let's say, savings increase, the context is, what is the nature of distribution? For instance, the extreme way we assume is all profits are saved and all wages are consumed. That's how we start, let's say, look at it in a classical sense. So, if you are looking at an economy, if you take into consideration distributional aspects, what would be its impact? And here I think we move from productivity to savings or from savings to productivity. There is something in between. The rise in productivity also is a shock to that of incomes. And that rise in incomes, certainly, where does this income go? And if it goes to that of wages increasingly, what happens? If it goes substantially to that of profits, what happens? There will also be problems. This is, I think, my innocent questions. But I'll throw it open and you can take the other questions also now. I'll throw the whole presentation to questions and I think we'll start with Professor Krishna.
So you have used an empirical approach using the data and then a models. Suppose there are two countries, one of them deliberately there is a intervention by government or somebody to increase the productivity, and then in order to increase the productivity, they try to mobilize savings and so on. Whereas in another country, there is no such activity. And now in empirical data, if you don't take into account what is happening behind the scenes, like that, whether there is any intervention, whether there is any program, etc. And if you do the analysis, it may not capture the real dynamics. So that means it may be a missing variable kind of a situation. If analysis is done without having an input, which is a public intervention, that may not give the right results. That's one question. The other one is, there is a lot of research that is done by Julia Bird on causality in computer science and data science from UCLA. And if you read his work, I'm sure you may have seen some of it. And he borrowed on his causal modeling using networks. It's called directed acyclic graphs. He uses this method for establishing causality, and he received actually a lot of guidance in developing that from econometrics. He went to the causal modeling world of econometrics in 1940s and 50s, and then developed. And by developing, he introduced this simulation that you talked about, same kind of a simulation. So he said, in order to establish, what did you call that? That simulation? Counterfactual. Yeah. He used the same notion, counterfactual simulation, to establish causality in directed acyclic graphs in computer science. Okay. So maybe you may try to relate it to some of the work in causality from a methodological perspective.
Thank you so much, Professor Malik, for a nice presentation. I do have two questions. My first question is regarding to the measurement of productivity. So I am wondering whether this, Cobb-Douglas production, particularly with neoclassical growth model, is it that you have adjusted, taken into adjusting the labor quality? If suppose you want to going to adjust the labor quality, then do you think your forecasting is going to make any sort of changes? That is first question. And second question is regarding to saving and the transition. So transition, you are assuming that the country as well as the saving rate are actually transiting only at a particular time. But assume, suppose the productivity transition is happening in X year or X period. Let's think about the saving is happening, the transition could be in X plus T or X minus T year. Then how are you going to capture in the model? Thank you.
So let me just Professor Krishna Kumar's point. When you have productivity transition, it's a boosting savings, and these savings are going to be used. Savings equals investment. So higher savings meaning higher investment, higher growth. Then it can again fit back. Okay, so the point we are making, when you have these higher savings, they are going to be utilized and will be invested. So that's the kind of assumption we have. And also in our model, saving equals investment. That is throughout when we are deriving TFP shock. Now, but we'll look at the causal literature you are mentioning. We'll look at that. The computer science, how do they do, and all. So we are using the latest literature in economics, econometric literature. So whatever has been developed so far. And the point Professor Reddy mentioned in the beginning is about the savings. Savings, you would have productivity growth, you will have higher savings. What do they do with that savings? And how does it get translated or transmitted to the economy? And I will give you one example for this. Let's look at Japan. Japan, since early 90s, economy has been stagnating, right? And they are accumulating savings, current account surplus, higher savings. There is no resource constraint, but that is not getting utilized. So you can have problems when the growth mechanism is not at work. There would be problems. Sometimes savings will be sitting there or getting invested in other countries in the form of capital flows and so on. See, there is so much of outward investment from Japan. So if you look at the balance of payments in Japan, FDI have actually negative FDI. So there is outward investment. So that is going out of the savings there, but it's used elsewhere where there is probably cost of production is lower or it's more efficient to produce elsewhere than producing at home. So that's how I think you will have an effect on income distribution and so on. Because there is no activity, of course, the wages will get stagnated. But with regard to the point Badri mentioned about estimation, I think Abhishek, you can take it up, that question. Yeah.
Okay, so basically we try to kind of, we are also dealing with several referees who are pointing these questions about measurement of productivity growth. We have been trying several alternatives. Now the point is that it doesn't matter a lot with the given data. Means I do not know the data which is like really, really true data. So whatever is the measurement of labor quality or labor force participation, the aggregate data is not having that much variation. So think about labor quality in India. The actual distribution of labor quality would be far more worse or bad or good than what we observe actually in terms of data that we have. So that the data doesn't have much variation actually, which is not very close to reality. The point I'm trying to make that even if you go and look at these data, and these data are not able to create huge differences in productivity growth than what we have. They create a bit of difference, but that's not quite a lot. And that's what we mentioned in the kind of paper that we tried several alternatives, not only labor quality, we also tried labor force participation rate differences. Since countries have different labor force participation for women, men, that might also create differences. We also tried for capacity utilization. So all of these things we tried, but it's not that much variation. I don't think that is driving these results. The second thing is about what if the countries have kind of consecutive transitions. Now the point is that our method, and we have provided these transition tables, we try different ways of finding these transitions. There's not much overlap actually. The good thing is that. So it's not that a country is transitioning in terms of growth today, and it is transitioning in terms of savings after 2 years or before that. So we have tables in the paper, there's not much overlap, and that is a kind of thing that you would expect. Because if these transitions are exogenous, then you should not be lucky in both ways actually very quickly. And that is what also we find, that these transitions are like kind of quite exogenous. So I will say that is not also a big problem in terms of our identification. So yeah, but the two questions were important, so I thought of clarify.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, very interesting. I had a quick question about the productivity estimation again. I'm really not very clear about the way you estimated productivity, like did you estimate the production function or just took the empirical data? So what were the assumptions about alpha and beta, the output shares of labor and capital? Because that vary across countries, right? So how do you address that?
It's done for each country separately. So all the productivity TFP that we have estimated for each country, and the way you do productivity from that, it's like solar residue. And but of course you have to, we take those parameters are estimated, right? And then productivity is derived for each country separately for like 100 and some.
The data is like kind of more than 100, like the database. For model based, we have 49. Because for model based, we need at least 4 years of data to estimate the model. So you have to calculate productivity from the data and also for 1 year. Right? So we use to estimate our first, we need a lot more data. So model based productivity is for 49 countries. For those countries for which we have at least 40 years.
And the output shares of labor
and it's again, and go back to the same thing. We try different labor shares and output shares with the range for developing countries.
Must be very different. Those estimates are also available in the paper.
No, it's not there in the paper, but the point is tweaking the capital share from, let's say, 0.35 to 0.3. It's not going to create those differences for cross country.
But it vary across developing and developed, right?
Yeah, but the point is that it's basically moving up level actually in terms of productivity doesn't create a lot of variation. Yeah.
Just clarification question. Is there, are you arguing that there is a kind of binary that if you boost TFPG, then it will automatically take care of savings? And so therefore you don't have to bother about savings. That's what your argument seems to be. But then let me give you two cases, China and America. In China, you have got a TFPG transition and a savings transition, both together. Almost the Chinese savings rate is close to 50%. And look at US. US, I don't know whether TFPG is still because TFPG transition must have happened much before and or continuously happening. Its savings rate has actually has dropped, and therefore it has got a different strategy altogether. So the TFPG transitions can happen at a different historical phases, and you are collapsing all of them. And for example, Japan's capitalist transition is 150 years old. It started in 1860, and whether it's quite LPG transition is required in savings that also need growth for many countries, and it is not. It would be dangerous to argue for, especially for developing countries, that savings rate you don't have to bother just to have TP.
It's an interesting topic, but it was coming to my mind whenever you were talking about saving. It's a saving, but you are talking about saving and corporate. Because if it is, if you disaggregate between this household saving and corporate saving, I think we can generalize this kind of causes. But I have a particular question for this. Whenever we are talking about especially the developments, what kind of policy trade-offs between boosting productivity and through capital accumulation and versus promoting selling-driven investment? Because very often we have seen in countries the consumption multiplier is sometimes lower than the investment multiplier. So not necessarily that saving will also convert it to investment. So how do you, in the context of this kind of a paradox between this total factor productivity and saving, especially developing countries?
We are using aggregate savings. So it's basically saving GDP ratio, right? Saving rate you get for all countries, but I am sure it would be including all types of savings, right? Both corporate saving and so on. So, I mean, governments don't save, they dissave. So mainly there is corporate saving and household saving, but it's aggregate saving later. But going to your point about it is true that these transitions would have occurred more frequently in the past in the US. China is also it's happening now. It's been in the last 20 years that we have seen there would be jumps. So we're talking about jumps, like 5%. Sorry, productivity growth around 2%. You will find that kind of jump, but not. It is true that developing countries you will find more of them contracting and going back and forth. So you will have more data points or more timing for developing countries. For advanced countries, it would be much less. You would expect now. But because the kind 2% jump is possible if you look at during the financial crisis 2008-9, suddenly they all recovered. That kind of thing could be picked up as a jump. Okay, but it has to be sustained. The point we are making, that itself will not be enough to justify it's a transition. So it has to be sustained for we are doing it like for 5 subsequent years. It's remaining at that level. And that's what we call as a transition. Otherwise, it will be discarded. So, Abhishek will answer.
So point related to different types of saving, yes, we are also concerned about one kind of saving which is external saving. Lot of countries in developing world just accumulate saving through exports. Like China is one of the examples. So we have results which is basically gross saving, this is domestic savings. So domestic saving excludes all these foreign ways of accumulating savings, and you still get the same result. So the savings are not driven by your kind of trade or your exposure to the world actually. These productivity growth savings mobilizes saving inside the economy itself. So it's not that you have productivity growth and you get savings mobilized from outside the world because you start selling them more. Okay, so it's like something that happens in the economy itself and that mobilizes more saving. So it's more nuanced than the saving because it's like mobilization of resources within the economy. And the second point is related to, okay, what about developing world and developed world and China and basically US and Japan? I can answer all of them. China had a very early productivity growth. The saving came very late actually. This has to be researched thoroughly. The productivity started in 1978 onwards when they had the rural reforms, agricultural reforms. Saving came in 1990s actually. If you go to Japan, Japan industrial revolution started after First World War. First there was the Second World War. The productivity growth was very rapid in 1950. Saving came very late in 1970. So there are historical examples which tells you what we are saying in terms of empirics. In the US, there has not been any productivity growth transition in the last 100 years. Everybody knows US is 2% on a kind of linear frame. So there's no productivity growth in US for last 2 years, so last 100 years. So US is not a good candidate for us to even think about what is happening to savings and not, because there's no transition. So, and if you look at the India's example, this India is basically what we are saying too. India has seen a decline in savings in the last 10 years, and you see what has happened to productivity growth in India. We are having all kinds of debate that, okay, what is leading to this saving decline, this, that, but we are not looking at the root cause, which is there is something that has led to decline in productivity growth. So I think that's like important to keep all these things in mind. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. My question is related to Sir's question. Since that question is not answered, I think, properly. The question is about the structure of the economy. When you are generalizing a result like this with robust statistical evidence, I think it has a dangerous consequence for the countries who are in the low income category and the low middle income category, particularly with a larger component or larger share of informal economy. The savings might have come from the corporate saving. And the level productivity we see normally it grows in the formal sector, where we have a large informal sector, 90% of the workers were involved in that, but the level productivity hardly increases in those sectors. And the saving, the domestic saving might have a very negligible component of total saving. So when this kind of result is generalized based on the country analysis you've done, so you should come out with a different kind of modeling which fits into the country who have a larger share of informal. Then a lot more things are there. Between these two variables, a large chunk of variable really works in it.
In this, the growth literature, normally it's a normal practice to use total factor productivity. I agree with you. One could actually look at the productivity of each input, each factor. So labor productivity, capital productivity separately, we don't do that. We use total factor productivity, which is a standard approach. And it can happen, that growth can happen due to process improvement. We call it process innovation, right? That's what drives it. So it's a proxy for technology in that sense. But yeah, one could look at labor productivity and capital productivity separately and see what is happening to those individual unit. But then we cannot generalize it. You have, of course, those inputs are already taken care. They are their contribution is already reflected in output. Okay, but we are saying anything more than what you are getting out of these two factor inputs. That is what is going to increase your overall output. Okay, so that productivity improvement is key, something you cannot explain using those factor inputs. So once we have that kind of a jump, it happened in the US. I think that computer revolution, what it happened in the 80s and so on, that increased productivity even in advanced countries. But I agree with you, Abhishek, it was not a transition big, but they did experience a high productivity improvement in computer revolution. When computers came in the 80s, there was a lot of agitation in India. People are protesting. We don't want computers because they will take away our jobs. And I was a student at that time. We were going on protest at that time. So, but it did help all the advanced countries to improve their productivity growth. But since then, all the advanced countries are experiencing decline in productivity growth. So there has been a big debate why there is this productivity slowdown in the US, in UK, and most advanced countries. It is not the case in the developing countries. They are experiencing, although there is some slowdown in China and India, but they are still at the kind of at the frontier in terms of productivity improvement. So I'm talking about aggregate. Okay.
But I would also like to make one important kind of related thing. This is even more important for countries like India, where you have very limited ways of augmenting saving, where you have a lot of poor people. Since you can't augment savings with a lot of poor people, they can't save actually. So only way to augment saving. So if you go by inform and say they are poor people, then only way to augment saving is to give them money save, isn't it? So that is not feasible. But if you just give them a kind of way to improve their productivity, then come out of their subsistence level of consumption and they will start saving. So it's even more important for countries where people are poor and there are a lot of informality to somehow think about opening the productivity loop for them. Because that is more effective way to augment saving rather than doing some kind of transfer and thinking some of them would be saved actually. So it's more relevant, I would say, in that sense.
When you see that you have talked about China, then how productivity preceded that. Actually, a substantial kind of increase in productivity in China was due to that of communes, where there is nothing like shown as savings. Let's see, just automatically reinvestments happening. So therefore, the huge human kind of capital that has gone into that of increasing production, which otherwise in a market economy, you would bring it and put there and show high savings. So therefore, the systems differ, and therefore, we can't, that's the question raised that there's, I think when you look at different countries, you can't compare Chinese kind of economy, how they accumulated huge kind of capital without being reflecting in the form of savings and capital. It's all the human labor that has contributed and reinvest. Just recycling, the whole thing happened. That's why it doesn't reflect in the data that you can. It appears as if the productivity increased and savings later picked up. By the time the country has grown to a point where they did show that there is savings. I know only clarification. We have to be very careful in some of these things, but obviously you have done the exercise and we hope you are careful. You had a question.
Yes. Thank you for your excellent paper. My intervention here is intrigued by Abhishek's intervention actually a little earlier about external savings coming into total savings of the economy and all that. So separating out domestic savings with the external savings and all that. Now, even for external savings, its productivity actually plays the role. And if you get into the kind of framework proposed to us by Melitz, it is actually the farms who have higher productivity, they catapult, self-select themselves into the export market, and that's why countries with high productivity actually export more than countries with lower productivity, and that explains, ties very well with the argument which Abhishek was trying to put forward. So I thought I will intervene here and tell you. Coming to the point raised by Jajati, Jajati has a very valid question, and his intervention is actually not going against the results that you have got. The lower productivity that we see in India over the period of time, not sustenance of higher productivity and low rates of savings over the past few years is a cause for concern, and that is, this low rate of savings actually can be explained by low rate of productivity growth in the Indian economy, and which has a large part to do with the kind of labor market or informal labor market where labor productivity is lower. Capital productivity might be high, but labor productivity might be lower, and that is giving lower labor share, and that leads to lower labor income and lower savings for the labor. So it can tie up well with the kind of intervention Jajati was doing. I don't know whether the argument which I am putting forth to tie up the lower savings and investment, lower savings and productivity growth in India, where it is actually sounds nice to do. Thank you.
Just want to, it's a clarification question basically. I mean, you're measuring TFE over a long period of time for each country. And these countries are going through transformation, structural transformation, which would mean that it would have moved, some of these countries have moved from manufacturing to services. And which would mean that measurement of TFP itself problematic once you move from manufacturing goods production to service production. Which would mean that there is a possibility that the residuals that you're measuring for TFPs, this is a known problem, but in service-oriented economy, the TFP measurement is more error-prone compared to a goods manufacturing, goods producing country. Now, how does that, and the problem here is not that the error is not the problem. The problem is that this error actually could end up being part of the savings itself. What is not being measured as productivity, what is not being measured as what is being spent on income, could be measured as savings itself. So, is there a problem of that nature? That is there a problem of comparing countries over long periods of time when they are under transition, and does it lead to some mismeasurement in savings productivity? Can you? I'm sure you would have thought about this thing. If not, how would you solve it?
I mentioned in the beginning, there are clearly econometric challenges. There's no doubt about that. Only different variables are there. There is omitted variable bias, endogeneity. There is a measurement error, the way you mentioned, how you measure TFP. But this is an analysis it's a cross-country analysis. You will have to use some aggregate measure. Of course, there is, you could think in terms of comparing manufacturing productivity across countries. That one can think about that. But we don't have any sectoral analysis here, but that is something to think about later. Because we are connecting all the aggregate variables, therefore we use aggregate productivity. Okay. And coming to this point about, external savings, and see, external savings can only come through capital flows. And when you have developing countries, even capital flows within advanced countries, they are also receiving external savings. The way you think about the knowledge spillover, other countries R&D coming into your country. And so there is that, and that can give rise to improvement in productivity. So the way you are mentioning about export premium hypothesis, which is like firms which are more productive, they tend to export, and they are going to get income from overseas, and that income could be savings of those people. So that's entering your country, and therefore it could increase the productivity further for those export-oriented firms, not for all firms. So, there is that, foreign savings dimension, but we have abstracted from that in our analysis. But we do have capital flows as a control variable, right? Trade to GDP ratio as a control variable. So all these variables are there. Credit to GDP ratio.
Controlling for that, you are doing only domestic.
Yes. So that is our. So all the controls that are used in the literature in different papers over time, they are all we have controlled for all countries. And this is what we are interested in is this. If you have this additional gain in output due to productivity improvement, due to process innovation, due to product innovation, and how does that get translated to other outcomes, and whether that can help us to mobilize the greater resources, more resources that can help investment and thereby growth. Okay.
One point to make about this, whether our results are kind of severely dependent on measurement error in TFP, not really. This is dependent on measurement error in TFP, but our main result is not dependent on that. Because our main result is dependent on transition. And I do not expect these measurement errors to cause a transition. These measurement errors to be slow, actually. So it should not be that, okay, I will have a TFP jump of 2% because of measurement error. So although I'm not using the TF data in a continuous sense, the measurement errors are not a big concern for me. That doesn't mean I'm saying not a concern for me, but not kind of driving my main result. We have been dealing with measurement error from kind of varieties of referees for varieties of reasons. So we have thought through about this, and I can tell you that our main result is not dependent on measurement error.
Just add one more point. That's why we are using both the TFP determined from data and TFP from a model. So just to make sure that we can deal with that problem of measurement error. Yeah.
Actually, this can be a robustness check for your results as well. What you can do is actually there's a world over there's the claims database on productivity. You get claims, capital, labor, energy, material, and services. Claims database on productivity, even for India we have, and you can look into the productivity using the claims database and see whether your results still hold good or not. Yeah, but that can be a robustness thing. That's what I'm telling you.
Claims database for it's a European countries.
Yeah, no, but they have made it for the globe actually. It started from Europe. Yeah, all of them are there.
Okay. I'm just wondering whether, independent of the econometric that is involved, so, I mean, what is before you estimate a model of this kind or some other kind, there should be some story visible even to the non-economist or non-expert. For example, what Aldo calls stylized facts. Right? Now, the problem with this interpretation issue is on both sides the model is closed in the sense on the productivity side it is TFP. So either you believe in solo residual and aggregate production function or you don't believe. On the activity side, you assume savings is equal to investment. So it's always a full employment moving equilibrium. Now, given this, what would be the practical lesson to a policymaker in this? Are you telling the policymakers that, look, just try and improve the TFP somehow, and then that will increase the rate of saving? Now, if that were so, then is TFP something of a
control area for the policy maker. Is it under his control to increase TFP?
So, absolutely, yeah. It's just think about if there is a, you are putting in something, you are putting in $100, you are getting $100 back. Instead of that, if you get 150, so that additional gain that happens due to learning, productivity improvement, due to innovation, people get more skill. That's why the literature developed about endogenous growth, human capital formation, all those things came. Education playing a role, R&D playing a role in driving growth. So if you have a higher growth, it is not only coming from those inputs, not because of the inputs, but because of this learning, knowledge spillover, and learning by doing. So these things, if you do not have, you would not be able to compete with your competitors overseas. In global market, anybody who can offer a lower price, they are becoming more competitive, and therefore you will not be able to sell your goods, right? Yeah. Because it's so.
The debate within the neoclassical, for example, Zorkian.
Yeah.
So that look, if you properly account for education, training, learning by doing, and all the input, capital and labor, then the TFP may be zero, actually. Right? Yeah, here there's nothing like a TFP independent of the input, material input. So I'm not getting even to that debate at all. All that I'm asking is, what is the possible lesson for policymakers in this country?
So in terms of policy, what we are saying, there is no need to introduce policies to save. You don't say introduce the policy just to make people, okay, we are giving incentive to save. Tax incentive or some other incentive to save, pension incentives, right? Those incentives. So there are a number of incentives which could be given by the government to save. So that is not really something which is sustainable. Okay, and so if you have an improvement in the economy driven by productivity growth, and that can happen only when there is innovation. And that's why a lot of the advanced countries are thinking of how to innovate. That's why we have AI today. AI was not there. It's making it efficient. Probably it will give rise to and higher productivity growth. We do not know that. So,
yeah. What I mean is, if we know that the productivity increase is caused by, say, growth in exports, all right, export demand, or productivity increase is caused by manufacturing growth, right? The Carlos growth laws, etc. There's plenty of literature surrounding that. Then, we have some handle about what is happening to the growth at all. But right now, if someone were to ask, what is exercise at all? What do we get from, okay, maybe there's a statistically significant correlation between TFP and saving. And also there is a robust test of popularity running from productivity growth. So what? I mean, what is the phenomena that we are trying to explain, understand?
See, if all the sectors are growing, we are using actual output growth from all the countries. So these output, when you see output growth, they are reflecting the growth process in a country, all kinds of growth. So there is export growth or other manufacturing growth. So all that is getting reflected in the overall output growth. So we are using that information and then trying to identify whether there was a productivity improvement or not. No, sometimes might not have any improvement. It will be zero, or it can be negative also. So can you, yeah.
Two quick points actually related to that. So even if I believe that my government says of increasing saving and increasing TFP, it makes all sense for me to prioritize my government to increase TFP because they can do it better than increase saving. they have many handles of doing it. Small reforms that can kickstart saving. Sorry, that can kickstart higher TFP in a way that we all understand. Means India's growth has been a TFP-led growth in 1991. Actually, what we did, all those reforms led to higher productivity. So governments knows how to kind of. I'm stop if you're going to. I have to, yeah. So I'm not going to debate. I'm saying that governments have some handle on that. Governments have no handle on savings.
Abhishek will wind up because I think once you're sticking on to that of TMP as a stimulator, then we can come back, as is being said, it's because of innovation. How do innovations come in a country? Maybe put more money into education. Yeah. That's perhaps the one which stimulates. Put all the savings into education. We would have been a better country now. Perhaps, I will close it. It's my own point of view. I understand the model, they may not agree. They are emphasizing that TFPs can push, let's say, the productivity, thereby, let's say, savings also. How does TFP get a push? Essentially through that of innovation. How do innovations happen? Make wonderful kind of education system with creativity. That becomes innovation. Let's put more money into education. Then the country would be better off than merely. Thank you very much. We close.
Thank you, sir, for such insightful and indeed thought-provoking session. Our expertise has enriched our understanding. Now, I would like to request Chair Dr. Narasimha Reddy to kindly felicitate Speaker Professor Sushant K. Malik. Yes, sir. Also, I would like to invite Dean, School of Economics, to felicitate Chair Dr. Narasimha Reddy. Thank you, sir. As we conclude this plenary session, I would like to invite Professor Krishna Reddy to deliver vote of thanks.
Very good afternoon. I think it started with the inaugural address, very slow insights. I think now this session, I'm sure a lot of stimulating ideas. And I would say I think the discussion Professor Sushant has made provoked every one of us to think and reflect critically, and still people want to think. You may not agree with whatever certain on difference of opinion on the findings, but I must say everybody might have agreed one thing, that the total learning productivity has increased in this session. So everyone might be taken in that sense. So I really appreciate, and I think the purpose of the conference, which is designed, has made all the students might taking this note of ideas how complex models making a simple presentation from followed by a theoretical and an empirical model. And also this would be a food for thought. Now we proceed for a lunch. And thank you very much, sir, for Professor Shan, sir, and as well as the Professor DNR for chairing, for reflecting and making more a fruitful session. Thank you to all the dignitaries and the participants for involving in this session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All the dignitaries, lunch is being served downstairs in the cafeteria. The technical session begin after the lunch in the main School of Economics building. Please join me.